Hey there, it is Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Radcliffe.
What a pleasure to talk with Phil Waldrep. He's got a book out. It's called Stop Chasing Happy. I think this is the follow-up to the tomato book. Phil, what do you think?
Well, it may be. Now you got to tell them the story about why you just said that. I've never written a book on tomatoes,
But
when
Phil
I
knows
was
everything there is to know about tomatoes. So
well, true. I was
Before
doing
we
it. Yeah, go
before
ahead.
we went live, Phil was mentioning that he was on a television program and they got him confused and asked him about tomatoes. And so he just went with it. So I figure, hey, why not? That'll be your next book, Phil, no doubt.
That's it. It was fun, and we were live. It was on television. It was alive, and it was a. The lady sat down, and I didn't talk to her in advance, and so when we sat down, she just said, "We're glad to have Doctor," and called this guy's name, who's an expert. He's going to help us grow tomatoes. And I realized we're on live TV. Do I say that's not me and embarrass her? So I played along. Hey, and I did the next segment as Phil Waldrep. It was a great show. So
Oh, that's awesome.
it was my multiple personalities, I guess, that day. So,
Well,
did you just reference Bob the Tomato and everything that he is about tomatoes, or
no, I actually did not. My kids are grown, so I haven't seen Bob to Tomato in a long time. But I just did what I guess you're supposed to do: plant them deep, water them, fertilize them.
There you go.
Keep the bugs off of them. Hey, it was a great segment. So
Yeah.
I guess I will write a book on tomatoes.
This is the real Phil Waldrep, and he's got a book called Stop Chasing Happy. Love it. We're so glad we could talk to you, Phil. You're a great, great guest. Love to have you back. There's a stat that I read here in May of, I believe it was 2021, maybe 2020. Americans are the unhappiest they've ever been. Let's talk about happiness and joy, and stop pursuing happiness and pursuing purpose. Why did you write this book now?
Well, I wrote it for a very simple reason. Everywhere I go and I traveled, I talked to people and they all said the same thing. I just want to be happy. And I looked at them, and sometimes these were wealthy people, they were famous people. They were people that I looked at and I thought, there's no reason in life you shouldn't be happy. I mean, many of them had a good marriage, they had a great job, they had good kids. Now, not in every case, but in most every case, but they weren't happy. So I began to think about people that I knew that really were happy. I mean, that genuinely had joy in their life, and I knew it. Now, they weren't wealthy, they weren't famous. Some of them were just average people every day. And as I started to talk to them, I discovered something. Happy people never sit down and say, I'm going to chase happiness. Happiness was a byproduct of them finding what God wanted them to be and fulfilling that purpose. So that's why I tell people, as long as you're chasing happiness, you're probably never going to find it. But when you find what God created you to be and you do it, the happiness and joy is the byproduct.
Phil, how do we get stuck in that rut of chasing and chasing and chasing instead of just stopping and realizing that God is the source for our happiness?
Well, I think it goes back to from the beginning. Maybe it's our culture. We have always been taught several things. Number one, we've been taught, if you have stuff, and one of the things that I did when I interviewed people was people would say things like, oh, I would be happy if. I would be happy if I had a better job. I would be happy if I had a different spouse. I had a lady tell me she'd be happy if she had different kids. Or if I lived in a different neighborhood. And there will always be an if. All of us will always have an if. If you want to be happy and you say, I'd be happy if, well, even if you got what you wanted, you would still have an if, because happiness is not in stuff. And it's not in people. It is in a relationship with the Lord. And when we can have a right relationship with the Lord, then, hey, that puts everything else in perspective. Our relationships are better. We have a right perspective on stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, as a fellow said one time, money won't make you happy. But he said, I'd rather, be miserable with it than without it. And I think all of us really do see that those things can have the right perspective in our life, but stuff and people themselves will never give you happiness. And that's what I wanted to help people to realize. Happiness comes when you discover what God made you to do. Every one of us has different DNA, what he made you to do, and then you go do it. And the byproduct of that is happiness.
Phil Waldrep, it's Stop Chasing Happy. and he talks about joy, and we'll ask you that definition, your definition of joy, in just a second. But you throw in there purpose. Once you start pursuing your purpose, you kind of take a change. There's a shift that basically happens. Let's talk about that. Our purpose.
Well, our purpose really I tell people as Christians, we all have the same mission, and that mission is to glorify God. That's true of Rick and Dan and Phil and everybody in the world. We're to glorify God. But all of us have a different purpose in glorifying God. And here's an illustration I use in my book, Stop Chasing Happy. Think about a football team. Now, I'm from Alabama. Football is a big deal. But think about a football team. You know, the coach, the players, the water boy, the fan, the cheerleaders, they all have the same mission. They want to win the game. That's what everybody's striving for. But everybody, though they all have the same mission on the team, they all have a different purpose. What the coach does is different from the quarterback. What the quarterback does is different from the cheerleader. What the cheerleader does is different from the linebacker. And even on the team itself, every position has a different purpose. You know, the nose guard doesn't get a lot of recognition on a football team, not as much as the quarterback does. He really doesn't. Yeah. But his role is just as vital in winning the game. So what I want people to know is that God made all of us to glorify him, but he's all put us all as children of God, as believers. He has put us in the family of God. And every single one of us has a different role to play. Some, we may get more recognition than others. There may be some that, you know, hey, you get a lot of applaud, a lot of attention. And then there's others, they never get applaud. They never get recognition, but they're just as vital. I'll give you a great illustration of that. My mother, for 51 years before she went home to be with the Lord, worked in the nursery in her church. And, you know, nobody ever came and thanked her, but that was okay. That was her purpose. Her purpose in life was to take care of those babies during church. And one Sunday when my mother got so seriously ill, she couldn't be there. And all the babies that she kept were in the worship service at their country church. Guess what? All of a sudden, everybody realized how vital my mother was. Though she was behind the scenes, all the crying and all the babies, they realized it. So we all have a purpose. It may not be with a lot of applaud, but when you find that, because my mother found great joy and happiness in taking care of those babies. So church could go on and they wouldn't be disrupted. All of us have a purpose. Find that purpose and happiness results.
That's so good.
Now, Phil, you talk about joy as well. Are joy and happiness synonymous? Are they different? Does one lead to the other? Tell us about that.
Well, it depends on who you ask. Some people say joy and happiness is the same thing.
Right.
But here's the way I think maybe in our American culture, we need to think of it. When we say happiness, we really mean having fun. That's the way our culture defines it. You know, I'm happy if I'm having fun. And sometimes as Christians, we distinguish joy as something that's deeper. You know, in the world's mind, or in the minds of most people, happiness is having every day be like a day at Disney World. Yeah. Well, everybody knows every day is not a Disney World day. Every day is not a day where it's all fun, no worries, no problems, because life happens. I see joy, and I think it's biblical to say this. Joy is a deep inner assurance that even though right now I'm going through some unpleasant experiences and I'm going through pain, God's got this, and ultimately he's going to bring me out the better on the other side. You know, every Christian life, you got to think about this a minute, Dan and Rick, just think about it. Every Christian life ultimately ends with joy. Even when a person is dying of cancer, you say, well, how is that ending in joy? Hey, because the moment they die, they're in heaven. It always ends with joy. And sometimes it's like when I was a kid, I had to have surgery. It was painful. I didn't like it. But I had the assurance that my parents told me this is necessary for you to have a better life and for you to be healthy and for you not to have some pain. And I trusted my parents and went through that very unpleasant experience that as a kid, I didn't understand, but they were right. And I think joy is knowing our Heavenly Father sees all of our experiences in life, takes us through those experiences, and on the other side, we come out stronger and better. So is joy and happiness the same thing? In my mind, they're not, because happiness is temporal, it's temporary, and joy is lasting. Even on the worst day, I can still have joy because I know God has got this and he is going to use it to glorify him in my life.
Good stuff. Phil Waldrep. It's a good book. It's Stop Chasing Happy. You can go to stopchasinghappy.com. We're running out of time. We got to take a break in a second. Phil, we'd love to have you back. It's only been out for a week now, but what have you heard? Have you heard response? What's been the response? Have the light bulbs come on when you talk about this stuff? What?
They do. As a matter of fact, some of the people who read an early copy shared it with some people who were in Hollywood. And I'm hearing from these actors whose life we thought was perfect now are saying, wait a minute, there is something deeper and richer here. My good friend Kirk Cameron, for example, who discovered this a long time ago, that happiness is more, has shared it, and his sister Candace as well. And all of a sudden there's these people, and I'm starting to hear now, even from some people who are very wealthy, who say, where was this book, 20 years ago, that I've spent my life chasing things, trying to be successful, trying to be wealthy, and I got it. And now I'm still not happy. And it's a little bit like, the car that caught the dog. And, okay, you've chased it for years. You finally catch it. What are you going to do with it?
Now what?
And so, now what? So I am hearing that kind of response, and it's very helpful because what I try to do in Stop Chasing Happy is help people to see that, but also help them discover their purpose, and then to help them see that no matter what happens in our life, God is going to use it for his glory and to fulfill that purpose when we team with him. But the good news is happiness, the joy comes when we fulfill that purpose.
So good. Phil Waldrep, book's called Stop Chasing Happy. StopChasingHappy.com, the place to go to. Let's catch up with you after the first of the year. Phil would love that if you would love as well. And we forgive you for being an Alabama fan. We really, really do.
Well, we're trying our best. And hey, maybe next time we can talk about growing tomatoes. That would be really fun.
That would be and cucumbers maybe too. We can get a whole garden going.
Hey, that's true. I like cucumbers too. We can do that. It'd be great.
I believe that would make us very, very happy. Thank you, Phil.
Well,
certainly would.
Thank you, Rick.
Hey,
thank you, Dan.
Check out the book. It is Stop Chasing Happy, Phil Waldrep. We'll be back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.